Okay, so welcome everybody to the Space Analog Stories. Today I have with me Dr. Rochelle Velho. So I'd like to welcome Rochelle. She works in acute and intensive care medicine. She's interested in aerospace medicine as well, and currently working at University Hospitals, Birmingham. Her current research focuses on Mars analog astronaut health as a crew medical officer for the Austrian Space Forum. In addition, she has established the Human Space and Extreme Physiology module at various UK universities to share her passion with medical students. So Rochelle, welcome. It's great to have you.
Thank you for having me, Jazz. That's fantastic.
What'd be nice is maybe just if you gave us a short background of yourself and your involvement, how you actually got involved in space analogs yourself.
Yeah, so I'm an NHS doctor, and I was always interested in aerospace medicine ever since I was at university at Birmingham, and I got interested in aerospace medicine when I went to the ESA Space Medical Workshop, which was a competition for medical students across Europe to apply for solutions that they could put forward for astronaut health. And my solution was how to do a different method of CPR or resuscitation in astronauts that get very sick when their heart stops. So that was my solution. And I went to Cologne in Europe, and I must have been about 20 at the time, and it was absolutely amazing because I got to meet all of the flight surgeons. I met a few astronauts in Germany, and that really was fantastic. That was the start of my aerospace medical journey, I think, and that's what made me interested in astronaut health in general, and going into a career that combined my interest in looking after patients in the NHS, as well as looking after patients that are in extraterrestrial environments, astronauts. So that's where it all started and where I got interested, and I started looking into ways that I could do this, and one of the ways that I could do this was work with analog agencies like the Austrian Space Forum. So the Austrian Space Forum is basically an organization that tests Mars analog suits, so space suits and make sure that they work in the right way, and you can do experiments in these space suits, but you have real live human beings. So you have actual analog astronauts within the spacesuits who are testing out all the kit and making sure that everything works. And this is a huge organization with lots of partners, international partners around the world and within space agencies to try and test out these bits of kit, because you need to test something before you actually take it off world. So to the moon or Mars, and that's essentially what we're doing. We're trying all these processes out.
That's fantastic. And have you been involved with them for a few years now? I think you said 3 years it's been?
No, so a little bit longer. So 3 years since I've since I took over the team of doctors and started leading them to look after the analog astronauts. But before then, I was learning how to do that myself, and I was a field medical doctor with the Austrian Space Forum, and my first mission was in 2015, and before that I was an intern with the Austrian Space Forum. So I was working in the lab and looking at the spacesuits and writing up about how to make the processes better from a medical perspective, and for the psychologists and the nurses and all that whole team. So it's not just doctors that work out there. And then I sort of moved into working in, so my first mission in 2015 was on a glacier, so the Clownhotel Glacier. So I got to go up to the glacier with the rest of the crew. And we have a small number of highly trained and selected analog astronauts that are able to don the suits, so wear the space suits. And as a doctor, you're part of the crew as well. So I was involved in cooking, in helping put, to help them into the suit. So you have more than one role. You're not just looking after your astronaut. And that was in 2015 when I was a junior doctor on the team. And then I've progressed through the years as I've got more experience to lead this amazing bunch of people to do what we do.
I mean, that sounds amazing. They absolutely sound like a fantastic organization. So medically speaking, what do you think some of the biggest challenges would be for a sustainable Mars colony? So, for example, like what would be some of the important medical considerations, and how would these be different compared to life on Earth?
So that's a really challenging question, actually, and there's whole textbooks written about what we might expect in terms of what will happen to your human body when you go to somewhere that's not the Earth. The Earth has a lovely atmosphere. We have the right amount of gravity that our bodies have developed and evolved to face. And I think the biggest challenges are probably the fact that the Martian atmosphere doesn't have oxygen, or doesn't have enough oxygen to sustain us as human beings. And oxygen is so important. It's like that fuel that drives all of the cellular processes in your body. And therefore, those building blocks then make all of your other organs work, and all of your organ systems work together to make you. And that's what's really important, that when we go to Mars, we need to work out a way of having sustainable amounts of oxygen in habitats, but also in the suits if you're moving between habitats. And the one way that is proposed to do this, you could think about using local resources. Can you actually use the regolith or the rocks on Mars to then generate oxygen from them and release oxygen in a different way? And that's called in situ resource utilization. And that's a really long word for basically saying that you're trying to get oxygen sustainably, continuous supply from a local source. And that's one thing that I think might be a solution for a potential problem, and a very real problem when you go to Moon or Mars or anywhere outside of our planet Earth. Another thing that's really important, and again is one of our basic things that we need to survive as humans, is water. And water is so important. There's only so much we can transport from Earth to basically take on our journey to Mars. And once you're there, if you're on a Martian colony, you need to have a sustainable source of water. Again, people are looking into how can you get water on Mars to sustain a human civilization, and could you do that from the polar ice caps, or can you do it in a different way? And I'm not an engineer, I'm not that's my background, but I'm watching these discussions with interest, because at the end of the day, it's really important to work together with the engineering teams to try and work out, yes, once you generate that oxygen or that water, is that then something that a human being can drink or breathe in? Because is it pure enough for us to breathe in? And it's trying to work out, is it the right composition of air? So breathing 100% oxygen all the time isn't good either, and that can lead to damage of your lungs. So these are all the things that we need to work together to try and come up with solutions.
Yeah. Something else that I was actually asked was obviously the difference in gravity. So someone asked me, they said, Mars has gravity fine, but it's obviously less than the Earth. But the journey to get there is quite long. So during that journey, what if someone gets injured and it's like a serious injury and you have to perform surgery or a medical procedure? Like, how do you do that without gravity, and what would happen to the organs and the blood? And I thought that was a really interesting question, and a very, funny way of looking at things. But it's really important. Like, that is a very important consideration. Things are very different in microgravity. So what do you think would happen in that kind of situation?
Yeah, so I think there's two very different things there. So we always look at, okay, what will happen to a healthy human being if they get injured on the way over? And then another thing is when they actually land, what will happen? And gravity, like you said, is so important. It really is more important than we realize, and we completely understand as scientists. But one of the things that we're looking at is, okay, so if you have, so if you have healthy bones, you go exercise, you're walking around every day, that mechanical loading when you're walking and ambulating, that then signals to some of your bone cells.
Excuse me, sorry. Could you just explain what ambulating was? We didn't understand that.
Oh, so when you're walking around as like human beings, so basically that when you're stepping, that then gives a mechanical signal to some of your cells, to your bones, to build or to not build as much.
Right.
So you don't want too much bone and you don't want too less bone. So that regulates, so you're auto-regulating your quality. So you as a human being are giving it advice as to what to do and which bones should be bigger, and your muscles are linked to your bones. So depending on how much bone you build or how much bone you lose, your muscles are linked to that and have a very close relationship.
Just out of interest, like what's the disadvantage of building too much bone, for example? Because you
so
might
if you have,
what's wrong with extra bone?
And if you have too much bone or too little bone, that changes your bone quality and changes your risk of fractures. So this brings you back to, okay, so if you're on this mission for a long time in low gravity where your bones aren't getting that signal, but astronauts, if you've seen, have special exercise devices, resistance exercise training devices, which helps build that bone. And doing that, you're keeping up bone quality. So you're trying to not build too much and you're trying to get rid of all that old bone that's not as good. This is a great, like a huge simplification of what's happening. Essentially, you've got two types of cells. You've got builders and I like to think of them as like cells that chomp away at bone. So you've got bone building cells and chomping away, and by that process, they're constantly turning over your bone, and they're constantly trying to keep it at the optimum quality. So your body is so clever at doing that. And if you go into the ISS, or if you're going on transit to Mars, you're not giving that signal to your body. So there's lack of gravity, you're on free fall. So basically your bone, like chomping cells or the bone building cells, they don't know what to do. So so the quality of your bone changes and you're more susceptible to fractures. And that's been proven in like by scientists in the literature. And it's so interesting because you say that what will happen if we have like a fracture in the middle or at the end of that journey, or as soon as you step on Mars with a little bit of gravity, so it's got less gravity than the Earth, but then you're more liable to fracture. So what happens? And the truth is, we don't completely know. We don't completely know how we're going to treat that, and we're still looking into what's the best thing, because we don't have a feasible method at the moment to do an operation on the ISS or on the way to Mars. This is still stuff that is being investigated by teams of scientists at NASA and ESA, and that's all they're doing. They're trying to work out, how do you do surgery? How do you?
Yeah, and it's a big step to try and investigate something like that on the ISS. Obviously you'd start with I don't know, mice or some kind of animal to begin with, but I mean it's still a huge brave step to take. So I was just thinking, like, how can analog space missions help here on Earth? Obviously, like, the gravity is something they can't investigate, but how can they help in general with this kind of research for establishing a Mars colony?
So there's lots of other things that analogs can help with, and one of them is testing different devices that are used to diagnose disease, so diagnose illness in astronauts, but also how do you treat that disease. And one of the things that we had on the Austrian Space Forum on the last mission was a 3D printer that could print medical tools. It's very early on in what we're developing. It's something that, 3D printers are very much at the cutting edge of science at the moment, and we're still trying to figure out what's the best tool to actually print and how can it help. So that's one of the things. And the tools that were being printed were for dental injury, something that's very common. Like if you have toothache, what does an astronaut do with that? So, I mean, that's one of the things that was being done. And in terms of diagnosis, obviously the suits have really intelligent sensors within them. So they're constantly sensing what's happening to the heart and the lungs of the astronaut, what's happening to what they're breathing in terms of their in-suit atmosphere. So you can diagnose by what's happening to their body systems as to whether or not they're heading towards getting ill. So you work out whether or not you can almost predict if they're going to get sick.
All
So
right.
that's really important. And we do that in patients on Earth, but it's really important that we get those processes right in a safe environment. So on the Earth, where we can look after these really amazing astronauts, and instead of being in the middle of nowhere, the ISS, where we haven't tested out the equipment and the kit. So that's really important.
Yeah, it's a much safer, more controlled environment, obviously, to test these things out here on the Earth
Yeah.
first. And then the next is maybe something like the ISS and further.
Exactly. The ISS and then lunar habitats, and then thinking about transit to Mars and then going to Mars itself. So I think we're quite far away from a Mars colony at the moment, but we still have to do these intermediate steps to get there.
Yeah.
So
all preparation.
Exactly.
So
And what you're doing in the dome is definitely part of that. And you did mention, like, what else are we doing? So I think even though you have gravity on Earth, you also like, one thing that's really important is thinking about psychology and team dynamics within that environment, whether these highly selected individuals work together towards a common goal. Important to do as well.
Yeah, and it's something that, I mean, so it seems that most people aren't really aware of sort of analog missions, and also don't realize that sort of going all the way back to the Apollo missions, the training was conducted first on Earth. I mean, those were essentially the first analog missions. You also have to understand the psychology of the crew and the way they work together and team dynamics, as well as testing the equipment and other procedures and systems, like, you know, what you're going to do if there's an emergency and such like.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of raising this awareness of, like, space. We all think about obviously going up there and the Apollo missions and landing on the moon, but it starts here on Earth, all the preparation before you get out there.
Yeah.
And so then going back to your analog experiences, can you share with us just like an interesting or a funny story or some anecdote that you'd like to share with us of your experiences?
Oh yeah, so there's lots of funny stories and interesting stories when I was on mission, but one of them was our nutrition is so important, and it's really important to have a healthy diet. So everything's planned for us in terms of what we eat as a crew. And in the first week, the preparation week, we got like a delivery. It's not quite like Tesco click and collect, but a delivery of all the food that we would be using on mission. But somebody must have made a mistake, because we ended up with loads of crates of gherkins. Anyone's had gherkins, but I mean, I think somebody must have ordered one jar of pickles, but up to be crates and crates. So we had like a load of pickles.
Read them all as part of your mission.
So it was, we didn't actually eat all of them, and I don't think we could have got through all of them. So we had them with every meal. So
seriously, you had to eat them with every single meal.
Every meal, that we had gherkins and a side of gherkins, or we had to come up with recipes where we could integrate these gherkins in. And gherkins, I don't usually have gherkins. You know, you have them sliced, and sometimes you have them in hamburgers and stuff.
Yeah, you might have it with a burger or in the burger.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've never ever had them in, like, we had them in spag bowl. We had them in everything.
I'm not sure. So do you either love them now or hate them, or you never want to see a gherkin again?
I don't ever want to see one again, to be honest.
What happened with the leftovers, like, for the next mission?
No, because it was so the last mission was in Oman, so it was in the middle of the desert, and they had to literally have trucks come out to deliver the stuff to the analog test. So this habitat was in the middle of nowhere, and you literally have to deflate your tires for the car to get through, to drive over the sand dunes to get to the habitat. Yeah. So it was we couldn't send them back. It was one way.
They'll probably go bad in that kind of heat as well eventually.
But we had to get a few other supplies so we weren't just eating gherkins. But
imagining these leftover gherkins just sitting out there in the desert still, just waiting.
I think it was just it wasn't like I was saying earlier. It's a bit like, you know, when you go to Tesco or Asda delivery and you're typing, somebody must have added a zero in the wrong place. Yeah, we had and we had a food tent where we stored all the food. So we had an inventory of all the food, and literally we had 2 shelves just
Yeah.
like
But you know, this is the beauty of all these things, is like things always go wrong. And like we were just saying, so your computer cut out just now because it
yes,
decided
yeah.
to update itself, right in the middle of your very funny story that you were telling. And it's this kind of thing that happens, and it will happen in space, and it happens everywhere, and you just have to go with it, and you just have to work around.
And it's so important, and I think that not just as medics, we have to work together as a team to try and preempt risk and to try and categorize that risk, like what's low risk, what's medium risk, what's very high risk if it does happen. But we don't have a crystal ball, right? So anything can happen, and we need to prepare for all the eventualities.
Yeah.
And try and minimize whatever risks there is to those astronauts that are going up to the ISS or beyond to Mars. And that's why analog missions are so important, to try and mitigate that risk.
Yeah. So you don't send
minimize
gherkins into space on the next mission. Like,
yeah, you don't want that many. No.
Lesson learned. I love that.
Yeah.
So imagine you had a friend who isn't at all interested in space. How do you think you'd be able to get them excited about space?
So I've had a few people who've not been interested in space at all, or science even. And I think that the best thing is there's annual meteor showers that happen that you can see in the UK, like not in Birmingham because it's like so likely. You have to go somewhere else outside of the city. And you don't have to go too far, actually, to the outskirts to find a spot with other people, because I wouldn't want to do it by myself.
Yeah.
And I mean, just borrow my telescope and here you go, and I can come with you and we can watch a meteor shower. And I think that's the most exciting thing to be doing, is to actually see the universe, because there's nothing more inspiring than seeing space in action.
Yeah,
and
completely.
there's nothing I can do to describe how amazing that site is. And when we were on the Canada Glacier, we had one night where it was just like about 2 hours of just meteor showers.
Oh,
and we
wow.
had our sleeping bags outside. Well, just watching the stars, and it was absolutely incredible. Absolutely one of the best experiences of my life, and I would definitely recommend that to a friend if they weren't interested in space.
It sounds amazing, I mean, that experience, but you're right, like there's not many people who don't think stars are beautiful, and so to actually see something like that in real life, yes, I think that's brilliant.
And then, I mean, not everyone can do that. So the other thing that I always say is I love reading books by people who've actually been to the ISS, have actually experienced it. And Chris Hadfield writes amazing books and about his experiences, and a lot of what he writes and his blogs and his lectures on YouTube or online. So I definitely recommend him. And Tim Peake's new biography, Limitless, is just out. So
yeah,
that's a way to have a look at, read about how other people, human beings, have experienced going to these extreme environments like space, and see what is so inspiring about space through someone else's eyes who's actually experienced it, is probably one of the best things.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there is still that very important human factor side of things to all space travel. Humans are still at the heart of everything. We always think about technology advancements and all those things, but people are really what it's about. And those are great book recommendations. I've actually got a few of those I'm going to have with me on my mission here in the dome, so I'll be reading along. These people are so inspiring. So what do you think about going to Mars yourself, just to visit or maybe even to settle? Would you be willing to take a trip to Mars?
I think that I always say that I don't think at the moment we're ready to go to Mars on this day, but just like we've got millennials and Gen Z, I think the current generation are the Mars generation. So you're going to be able to be in a position when you grow older, like when they grow up, to have the technology and the understanding of what happens to the human body on Mars, and how we can work together with machines to live on Mars. And I don't think we're completely there yet. We're just at the start of understanding everything that we need.
For the next generation.
So I think it's something that so as a scientist, I'm trying to learn as much as I can and process that information as much as I can to try and then project those risks that might be there for that next generation, that Mars generation that are going to be able to do it.
Yeah.
Probably be my children or children's children, so it won't be me necessarily, but if for some reason we had like a great technological advance go, then I wouldn't say no to go to visit.
Absolutely, yeah. And what do you think if you did visit by some technological miracle? What do you think you'd miss the most about Earth?
I think what I'd miss is walking along the beach and looking out to the seaside and just looking at the sea.
Yeah.
That's what I'd miss Earth, because Earth is beautiful. I think we forget when we want to, as explorers, yes, we want to know what's out there, we're curious, we want to know all of that. We forget that actually we've got an amazing planet right here, and that's what I'd miss. I'd miss seeing the clouds as they change when it's just about to rain. I'd miss watching the sea as it starts to become stormy.
Yeah.
And it's all those little things, and of course, like my friends and family, like you said, if that wasn't in the picture, then definitely the Earth itself and all the amazing things on Earth, or going to the top of a mountain and looking out, that would be what I'd miss.
Yeah, even the most basic things that you take for granted, like a breeze on your face, you know, like you'll be in Mars, you'll have your helmet, you wouldn't feel the breeze on your face. Something as simple as that. I have a feeling that you'd miss it eventually after having
and
so long.
Snow, like that feeling of fresh snow, like when it
Yeah.
comes, and that need to go out into the snow, untouched snow, and build a snowman and do all of those things that you want to do, and that's what I'd miss. I think I'd miss the Earth and everything that it has to offer.
So let's say you're on a spaceship on your way to Mars. It's a 2-year journey. What one item would you take with you that we're not things like digital items, so we can leave like family photos, that's all accessible to you on your computer, let's say, but a different item?
So I was thinking about this, and I've had this question before, and I think what I'd like to do is take a Mars bar, because I'd love to eat a Mars bar on Mars.
I love that.
I know that's really silly, but I'd love to do that, and I'd love to. That would be so much. I mean, to be the first human that ate a Mars. I mean,
so fantastic.
Life goals.
Yeah, life goals to eat a Mars bar on Mars. Oh my god, I love that. That is brilliant. I think that's a fantastic answer. Okay, so I think just to sort of conclude then, just coming back to the UK and the space industry here, what do you think, what area of space would you like to see the UK expand in and maybe invest more resources into?
So the UK is really strong in terms of satellites and engineering and aerospace engineering in general. I mean, it has a very strong sector with lots of investment. As a space medical doctor, I'd like more investment in the life sciences element to try and that I'm completely biased towards that. And to see CubeSats and existing technologies that we have, like drop towers, etc., be harnessed to actually investigate what happens at the cellular level as well as at the whole human body level, to see what happens to organs and cellular functions and enzymes and all those processes that make us tick. And I think that that's really important. And there's a lot that we can learn from investing in life sciences and human and learning about the human body. That can translate to help NHS patients. So there's a group in the UK at the moment that's looking at different exercise devices for astronauts, but they're also physiotherapists in that group who look at stroke rehab. So a lot of the lessons we learn from astronaut rehabilitation can translate to real patients that I look after day to day. So I think that's what's really interesting, is to see those really amazing spin-offs from the space sector to the human life sciences sector, and trying to investigate where those spin-offs are and how we can try and optimize healthcare for astronauts as well as just general humans on Earth is really important.
Yeah, I think so. So what's next for you in space?
So I think I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. So, for me specifically, I'd like to continue to look into research that does that. So looking at life sciences research, doing analog missions, and hopefully doing more complicated missions with the NBL facility, with NASA NEMO, and thinking about, you know, how can we really optimize suits and different devices to help astronauts survive in extreme environments.
What is the neutral buoyancy, the NBL facility?
So the neutral buoyancy facility is just giant swimming pool, and it has the real life ISS like submerged underneath, and astronauts can wear their suits and perform their spacewalks around this mock-up of the ISS. And that's for me would be amazing to see, because I've never seen that. I've seen the European one, but I'd love to go to NASA and see that, and see space doctors at work while they look after those astronauts in the yeah.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. So is there anything else you'd like to share with us then today, Rochelle? Is there is there any way that people can maybe follow your work or learn more about the things that you're doing as well?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter. So if you just Google me and follow me on Twitter, or message me on Twitter with your questions, and that's one way of just keeping in touch and connecting. And I think that the one message that I'd like to share is that no matter what, like, keep being curious and exploring, because I think that's such a key part of being human, is to always ask the next question, and don't be afraid of asking questions, because no questions are too small or too big. It's just so important to keep chasing your passions and your dreams by asking questions constantly, and I think that's really important to do.
100%. No, that's absolutely fantastic advice. I agree completely. So thank you so much for doing this today with us and sharing all this information. It's been absolutely fantastic and lots of fun.
It's been so much fun. So thank you for having me in your analog diaries.
Thank you.